In this video, we're going to look at some paper money that I picked up from my favorite coin store, my favorite local coin shop. He doesn't really specialize in foreign currency, so if anything shows up in the shop that he doesn't think is particularly valuable, he drops it in a 2 for $1 bin. And so there were a couple of different times that I picked up about 6 banknotes there, and so we're going to take a look at them in this video. We're going to start with the Saddam Hussein note, which are not particularly rare, but for people that don't particularly collect banknotes, they might collect a Saddam Hussein note, especially people who are in the military. A lot of these were probably taken as souvenirs for people who fought in the Gulf War. So these are extra interesting to people that don't even care about paper money. This one is a 250 dinars note here. I am a foreign coin collector that will dabble in paper money if I find things that are interesting. And of course, Saddam Hussein notes are interesting. I think this is my fourth different one. This one is dated 1995 right here in their currency. It's going to look like, or in their numeric system, it's going to look like 1990, but they draw a 5 like we would draw a 0. This one's going to be in the catalog at number of 85. And uncirculated, it's listed as $1.25, but this one is definitely not uncirculated, so I'm not really sure what to put for the value of this one. But we also have a hydroelectric dam there to the left of the portrait. When we flip this one over, the design, the strip that goes across the middle here is a frieze from the Liberty Monument. So I do find this kind of interesting that a place like Iraq would have a Liberty Monument. They're putting things on their money that makes it look like it's a great place to live, like they have a lot of liberty under the rule of Saddam Hussein. But of course, no one's going to make paper money that's going to give you the impression that it's bad to live here. So I just always find that interesting. Our next note is going to be from Brazil. And so I suspect that most of the notes that came into the shop in this lot are just people traveled abroad and then ended up with some leftover paper money. They may have wanted to keep them as souvenirs. Maybe they couldn't exchange them. And then they didn't quite know what to do with them. And so they just went to see if the coin shop would sell them or buy them from them. This one's from Brazil, and it's a 1,000. They call, in Brazil, if you would call it 1,000, they would write it as the word mil. So it's mil cruzeiros. This is coming soon after a period of hyperinflation, and it has no date on it, but it was made in 1990. Catalog number is 231B. This one features Candido Rondon, and there is a variation to this note that I think is pretty interesting. It has to, over here, where it has the word Ministera. If you have that word ending in the letter A, then this is 231B, but there's another version where it ends in the letter O for Ministero. I like the shape of Brazil that's on this note. See if the if we can get the watermark to show up there. That is supposed to be their equivalent of the Liberty head. Flip that one over, and this is supposedly indigenous children. Behind them on the right is a hut. On the left is some food, so fish and some things that would have been harvested on here. In very fine condition, this one has a book value of 40 cents. We'll move on to something else that probably showed up in pocket change. This one is from Argentina. It's a 10 pesos or 10 pesos note. There's no date on here, but it would be dated 1998 through 2003. There is a newer version of the same note. That one's going to knock it over. So let's get that Brazilian one out of here. And we'll put this one back on the screen. So there's a newer version of this note, which is missing the word that's written right here. The convertibles de curso legal is missing in the newer version of this note. Person shown here is Manuel Belgrano. The green figure to the left is their embodiment of liberty. This one also has a watermark of the same gentleman right here. And I like how it has his initials MB there also as part of the watermark. And we'll flip this one over now. As we have Monument a la Bandera Rosario on this side. Well, they're going to keep falling over. I'm going to have to turn off my fan here. This one, if you found it in uncirculated condition, has a book value of $15. The catalog says if you find it in very fine condition, you just would use the foreign exchange value. So I looked it up. Time has not been kind to Argentina, so that would be 1.2 cents in the US dollar. So probably actually worth a little bit more than that. But as we're talking about money that has probably showed up from pocket change, we're going to move to this 100,000 lira from Italy. This one is from a series from 1994. It is catalog number 117B. The B is based on the signature, which appears right there, which I believe is Amici. The actual date is based on the second letter of the serial number. So it starts with PD. So the letter D means this was actually made in 1997. The portrait here is Caravaggio in the kind of a black ink, and to the right of that is two ladies in a red ink. Take a look at the watermark on this one. It's also going to be Caravaggio on here, but I also like the security thread through here. As when you hold the light up to it, you can see the words that are actually imprinted or maybe carved into that security stripe. There's another stripe here in the middle that does not have that carving to it. As we flip this one over, we have a fruit basket here on the back. The catalog says there's a castle in the center, but I don't see it. So I've picked up some banknotes before, which at one time had a pretty nice foreign exchange value, but of course the Italian lira was demonetized as they went to the euro. But if you could still trade this in at the lira to euro exchange rate in US dollars, this banknote would have been worth $57. And so I'm thinking there is probably some unfortunate person who went to Italy, loved this banknote, or they were unable to turn it in, and they came home with it and they held on to it. And today it does not have a foreign exchange value at all. Now the catalog says that it's still worth in very fine condition. They say it's worth $13.50, but someone had to lose $57 for me to pick this up for 50 cents. And so sometimes you just have to feel bad for people like that, but they had their chance to take care of it and they didn't. We're going to move on to a note from Saudi Arabia. This one is in sort of rough shape, not the best condition. But this is a 10 Rials note from 1983, catalog 23A. It's going to feature King Fahd. And the catalog had a couple of interesting things that it pointed out to here. Oftentimes you have to look at the signature to find the actual date. So on this signature, there's a tiny little squiggle in the corner underneath the signature, which actually is the word in their alphabet. It means acting. And so this was only used as a short time where it was an acting, uh, someone having to do with the central bank or the money here. So I thought that was interesting. There is also another note about this one. If you look at the two vertical lines right here, there is an accent mark about right there, which should not be there, and that was improper. And so because of that, 23, that gives it the A of 23A. And that makes this the rarest version of this note that isn't a specimen. Go ahead and flip this one over so we can see the palm trees on the other side. So since this one's in kind of rough shape, there is probably no premium over the foreign exchange value. But the foreign exchange value is still $2.67 as of today. Now, it will say that if you found this in uncirculated condition, the most common version of this note has a book value of $9, but this rarer version of the note with the mistaken accent mark on it would have a value of $18. Let's take a look at the watermark on this one where it has King Fahd again in the watermark. We'll move on to a banknote from Jamaica. This is $1. It's from a series which has a date. It has the law of 1960 right there. This was actually printed in 1970. It's catalog number 54. And there is another version from 1976, which is very similar, except the $1 sign right here and the $1 sign right there were also in white, like the one in these other two corners would be. So that one's KM59. This one has a watermark of a pineapple. You can also see the line that runs through it, although there's a tiny little gap there right above the L in dollar. As we flip this one over, it has a nice island harbor, tropical harbor scene. The portrait on the other side was Bustamante. It says the very fine version of this note is $2 and the uncirculated is $8. This one's not quite uncirculated, so maybe it's worth $5, not really sure. We'll move on to a note from the Soviet Union with a portrait of Vladimir Lenin on here. This one has a currency that I've never seen before. Now, maybe if you work with notes more often, maybe you have seen it, but I've never seen a coin with a currency value of 1 sherbets. This is not a ruble, this is 1 sherbets. Well, a sherbets is equal to 10 rubles, so this is actually a 10 ruble note, but they wrote it as a 1 sherbets note. It is dated 1937. And this was made to commemorate the 20th anniversary of the October 1917 revolution. It's KM 202. We flip it over and the year 1937 shows up here under the number 1. This one's in the catalog in very good condition, listed at $10. And I believe there's also a 5 and a 10 that are very similar in appearance to this one. Next, we'll move on to a note from Nicaragua. And so for this one, one of the things I like about paper money is you have more detailed drawings on them than you can possibly do with a coin. And so for this one, I decided to just see what kind of history can I learn just from the images which are on the note. And we'll do that on the front and the back. So this Nicaragua note is 20 Cordobas from 1978. It's KM 129. And so the lady on the right is Rafaela Herrera igniting a cannon. This is based on a story when the British were trying to invade a river there as they wanted to conquer some of Nicaragua. Her father was the military leader of the area and he was killed in battle. And so she decided to take over because no one else was willing to step up. So she fired the cannon multiple times, and in so doing, she killed the British fleet commander. So she would be considered a local hero. So that's kind of a neat story. Seeing that, we flipped this one over, and this was something that was more of recent history to a note made in 1978. This is according to the notes, the abrogation of the Chamorro-Bryan Treaty. Bryan in that is William Jennings Bryan from American history. You might recognize that name if you are from the United States. And so the Wilson administration signed a treaty with the Nicaraguans uh, for the purposes of creating a canal through Nicaragua. And fast forward a few decades, it turned out to not be in Nicaragua's best interest. And so here they are having a ceremony where they are essentially dissolving, or the term that they use is the abrogation of that treaty, which the United States was then okay with. This note in a very fine condition books for $1.50. We'll move on to this note from the Dominican Republic. This one is a 100 peso oro from 2003. Catalog number 171C. The C is because of the year of 2003, which appears right there. The three people featured here are, well, it's probably easier to read it on the screen than I can look at it. Sanchez, Duarte, and Mella are the three men featured here. One thing I like about this note is the color changing ink here, which eventually appeared on U.S. notes too. So kind of a darker to gold color as you look through it. But I also like the weaving security note there that has kind of holographic letters on it. So that is also a neat feature. This one also has a watermark right here of Duarte, who was pictured in the middle on this note. As we flip this one over, also has some gold ink printed on it on the left. This is supposedly the Count's Gate. So this one, in this condition, also you have to go by the foreign exchange value, which I guess Dominican is not as bad off as some other countries in the area, as 100 pesos will still be worth in United States money $1.73. Next, we'll move to a note in pretty rough shape, but it's an older note from Japan. This one is a 100 yen. This is an older writing of the yen. I've seen that on coins, but that's not the way that it's currently written today. This one doesn't have a date, but it was produced in 1953. The catalog number is 90B. And I think because there's several different versions of this note, one is called light brown paper and the other is white paper. And it's kind of tough to say whether or not this is paper that was at one time white and is just now kind of rough and ragged, or if that is an actual light brown on here. There's also a version, I believe, that's older that only has one letter in the serial number. That one's a little bit rarer. So the person featured here is Taisuke Itagaki. And as we flip this one over, I looked this up in a couple of different places to try and figure out what this building is, and it's always written as the Diet Building. And so I don't know what that means, the Diet Building. This is, again, in pretty rough shape, so you're going to have to go by the foreign exchange value, which 100 yen is today worth 71 US cents. We'll now move on to, this one is almost not worth the paper that it's printed on, but it is something it's kind of unusual, at least I thought, from the province of Tucuman. Has a value of 1 austral. So this is going to be a regional note from an area inside of Argentina, another of those countries that's had a lot of rough times over the last recent decades. And so a lot of their provinces made their own currency. The austral as a coin collector, you don't see those very often because they only made them for about 2 or 3 years, and I believe that's the same with the paper money here. Now, not all paper money has a date on it, but this one has a date of 1991, but it's for a different purpose. This one is actually saying this note is valid until 30th of November 1991. So that's not the day that this series was started, it's when this is no longer valid. When we flip this one over, that is a lot to read, especially if you can't speak their language. I did see a date on there of 1988. I guess decree from 1988 right there. So that kind of gives you a clue maybe when this note was first in use. So the catalog number on this one is you have to go to the catalog of, it's not in the regular currency catalog. You have to look up the regional issues and the world's unusual banknotes to find catalog number S2711B. And there is a variation there with the B because the words at the bottom, Jardin de la Repubblica, don't appear on all the notes. This one has a value of 20 cents. We've got one more note in this video. This one is going to be from England. And so this is a 10 shillings note. And so I believe this was when they started to print banknotes with Queen Elizabeth on it, this was the lowest denomination note that they made of 10 shillings. So there's not a date on here, but it was produced somewhere between 62 and 1966. Catalog number is 373B. And so this is near the end of the run of the pre-decimal system. So at the time, 1 shilling was worth 12 pence. So that made 10 shillings 120 pence. 2 shillings, 5 shillings make a crown. 4 crowns make a pound. And so to do the math here, that makes this 10 shilling note half of a pound. So that makes it the lowest denomination one that they made at the time. It is version B because the autograph that goes across the bottom right here is J.Q. Hallam. signature, and that kind of narrows down the date. This one has a watermark of the laureate head. And then when we flip this one over, the circle in the middle there does remind me of British pennies, where it has the Britannia character facing the side here with her shield by her side, holding the sword, holding wheat. That looks a lot like what you'll see on an old British penny. So this one's probably not very fine condition, but if you found it in very fine, the catalog says it books for $4.50. All right, hope you enjoyed seeing these videos that I picked up from my favorite coin shop. All right, thanks for watching. Bye.